A couple overview notes. I'll spend about 15 to 20 minutes going through a dozen slides. After that, we'll have a good 7, 8 minutes for questions. If you have any questions, I would be writing them down as I go, slide by slide. And then once we get to the Q&A part, simply pop your question into the chat here on Zoom, and I'm happy to get to as many questions as I can. As we move to the next slide, the reality of modern admissions. The number of applicants has skyrocketed over the past several decades. As you can see, just some quick numbers here. Stanford alone, just over a year and a half ago, got over 57,000 applications. Their acceptance rate, 3.68%. And then when you look at Harvard, 4.7. But when you really look at it, why is it so competitive? Grades are necessary, but they're not sufficient. Think of it as opening the door, but not walking through. Colleges shape communities, not just classes. In particular, every admitted student is a future roommate, lab partner, coworker, alumni, and I would even add to this a future ambassador of that university. Think of it this way. Just like the first part, grades are necessary, not sufficient. It's not enough to have a 4.0. What value will that student add to the university, not just while they're there, but when they leave? Will they be an ambassador that makes state or national news? Will they represent the alma mater well? The process is human, and that's the good part. In particular, real people will read your applications. That means a compelling, honest story can resonate, even if the GPA isn't perfect. Again, they're looking at many different criteria. And then light bulb down here. The most competitive students aren't just academically strong, they are strategic, authentic, and clearly positioned. The next slide here, what holistic admissions really means. You see the 6 criteria, academics, and not just the GPA, the rigor of the courses, test scores, rank. Extracurriculars, not surprisingly, are important, but it's not enough to just join 5 or 10 clubs. The real focus with Parinama and with college admissions is on coherence. Did you do a few things well and offer depth, find your niche, your voice? Leadership, consistency, therefore finding your spike. Essays are extremely important. It's not enough just to be a good writer, to get good grades in English classes. You need to articulate your voice, story, authenticity, and reflection. Put differently, it has to be about you, not about somebody else. Recommendations. Recommendations are also very important. Instead of cookie cutter recommendations, it's very important that the teacher, the club advisor, an internship supervisor, a research supervisor focus on something specific, growth, something unique. I probably wrote 5 to 10,000 letters of recommendation over 20 years. And for everyone that I wrote for my students, I would always find something very specific and unique about that student. And I think that's why it helped them not only for college and graduate school, but also later getting jobs. Character and fit. The reality is that an excellent student may not be a good fit for one university, and yet a student that's not excellent academically, but has a good fit might get into that same university that the other one did not. The reason why is they look for your values, curiosity, resilience, campus vision. Why are you a good fit? Institutional needs. This is a whole host of things. Geographic diversity, legacy, first generation, talent gaps. In other words, a lot of the intangibles that we may not think of. What admissions officers actually read and how. They do read the transcript, again, not just the actual GPA or grades, the rigor of courses, trajectory, how you are flowing, from freshman to sophomore, junior, senior year. Did you show improvement or did you go down? In other words, they look at context. Activity section. They look at your top activities, but what they really want to focus on is depth, focus, and impact. In other words, do a few things well. Essays, again, very important. That gets the most time. They read for voice, authenticity, self-awareness, as opposed to something generic. Recommendations, again, these are specific anecdotes. They show what is unique about that student, how they grew, how they stood out. In other words, they didn't just do the same thing that their peers did. They did something unique. They spoke up, they took initiative, they showed impact. Down here, the total average read time for a single application, 8 to 12 minutes. It's the idea that your first impression matters. You need to make a difference right off the bat. The power of narrative in admissions. First of all, what is a strong narrative? We have a handful of characteristics here. Every activity points in the same direction. When I was in high school, my big focus was on student government leadership and making a social impact. It wasn't enough that I joined student council. In particular, I became an officer and eventually I was honored to be the student body president. But even that was not what I was most proud of. What I was proud of is that I created initiatives for the whole student body of 1,200 students to serve the poor, including the elderly, children. We helped children with special needs, and we actually coordinated events, raised a lot of money. We helped them out socially in their community. So that is the idea of helping all my activities focus in one direction. The essay, it deepens what activities show. So it's one thing to be involved, but then the essay needs to be coherent with the actual activities. Recommendations confirm from an outsider's perspective what the student says. Put differently, your recommendor is saying the same thing you are, which makes it more objective. The student is the same person in every section. Again, consistency. And then fifth, there is one clear, memorable thesis. Maybe it's STEM, creating something. Maybe it's social impact. Maybe it's rhetoric and debate and persuasion. But we need to see coherence. A weak narrative. You can see these activities are all wonderful unto themselves, but combined, they're very scattered. They're all over the place. They're not coherent. Okay. However, a strong narrative, 3 to 4 years in STEM, science journalism, and then maybe creating something. In other words, it reinforces the consistency. Admissions officers here at the bottom should be able to describe a student in one clear sentence after reading their application. Think of it this way. How many times have you written a paper and your teacher said, start by identifying the thesis? Okay. Well, if the thesis is the main point of that essay, the narrative is your thesis. Okay. So as a person, not as a paper, what is your thesis? What is your narrative? What makes students genuinely stand out? Initiative. Initiative is so important. I remember with all the students that I taught over the years, let's say there was a 4.0 student, very smart, but they were passive. They just absorbed and they could repeat knowledge. They showed up, but they were quiet. But then I had a 3.0 or 3.5 student, not as academically strong, but they showed initiative. They took risks. They created things. I definitely would prefer the latter student at a lot of universities. They're going to make an impact to the student body and campus, as well as the community and likely beyond when they graduate. Example down here, student who noticed her school had no mental health resources, built a peer counseling program. I actually did that when I was in college, by the way. Really cool stuff. Demonstrated impact. Not I volunteered, but my initiative resulted in X. Let me give you an example of this. Right now, as a career coach, I coach very talented people from Amazon, Google, Meta, all those different types of companies. They are not evaluated, paid, rewarded, promoted for doing their job. They are evaluated for impact and value that they add. Do they improve their company? That's what matters. So the idea is outcomes matter. So let's back up and go from the workforce to college, college to high school. You need to start demonstrating your impact now. You're not going to be perfect. Don't worry about it. But at least you're raising your hand, showing up, taking risks, and showing initiative. An example down here. Maybe you tutored 3 students versus I built a peer tutoring program that served 60 students. Huge difference. Intellectual curiosity, okay? Reading the syllabus is one thing, okay? But the real student that gets it asks why and what if, okay? That shows depth. Put differently, they pursue ideas because they're genuinely fascinated, not because it looks good. Example, a student who emailed a dozen professors asking to read their unpublished papers after reading one citation in a book. That is huge. So maybe two responded, but one led to a research collaboration. We have a young student out in North Carolina, Tejas, between junior and senior year. He was able to get a research assistantship helping a Duke University professor. Well, Tejas never would have had that unless he showed initiative and was curious. Authentic voice. The essay doesn't sound coached or polished to the point of sterility. It sounds like a real specific self aware teenager who actively lived these experiences. An example down here the most memorable essay one officer described was about a student's obsession with repairing old radios for their grandfather, not curing cancer, right? Being president of the United States. The idea is it was specific and genuine and authentic. Admissions officers remember 3 to 4 applications out of 50. Make yours authentic and one that they remember. Why students still might get rejected. General, generic, forgettable essays. Again, the goal is not a topic. The topic could sound really impressive, immigration, injury. But did you show your authenticity? That is important. Number 2, no clear direction or narrative. Maybe there's 20 activities you do in high school, but there's no clear narrative or thread. The officer can't answer who is the student really. Activity overload without depth. This is a reoccurring theme that we mentioned before. Poor college specific research. This is really important. Every college has a unique culture and fit, as we mentioned earlier. In addition to that, you need to look at what that particular college wants in their essays. And every college has different essays, unlike the Common App, which is across the country. Officers need to be able to tell when a student genuinely knows their campus culture. Let me give you an example of this. So when I was working with Tejas was applying to a lot of great universities. Duke, UNC, Chapel Hill, Hopkins. He also was interested in Baylor University's medical program. It's kind of a combination of undergrad and then medical school. Well, what makes Baylor unique is that although it's a major Division I university, they really focus mind, body, and spirit because it's faith-based. And while, yes, it may be founded on Christian values, and some of our students may identify with that faith, Tejas in particular grew up Hindu. And it was a very important part of his identity. And Baylor accepts students from all different religious traditions. So Tejas was able to communicate the importance of his spirit, his faith, with his well-roundedness. And he ended up not only getting accepted, but getting an incredibly high offer in terms of the money that they were willing to give him. Weak or misaligned recommendations. A letter from a subject irrelevant teacher who barely knows the student. That's going to scream loudly. It's going to be obvious. Again, coherence. Starting too late. Doing all of these things we're talking about cannot be done in the several weeks or a few months before applying for colleges. A wise student who finds their narrative voice, niche, and what we call spike, they've done it throughout freshman through senior year. It takes years of really building this story. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to show an overall trend of intentionality. And again, this word coherence. Now, none of these are permanent. Every single one is avoidable with the right strategy. Admissions myths debunked. Only perfect students get in top schools. Not true. A 3.7 GPA with a compelling spike and strong essays could actually get better performance than the 4.0 with no narrative. You need international awards to stand out? No. Most admitted students do not have this. They don't have the trophy case. Consistent local leadership can make the biggest impact. Think of it this way. There's this old saying from the 70s when the environmental movement got really popular. And it said, think globally, but act locally. Okay. Make a big impact in your community than something rare or impossible for the masses. Donating money guarantees admission. No, there are stories of this, and yes, it's happened in the past, but legacy and donor does exist, but they do not guarantee admission. Okay. Only STEM students get into top schools. Not true. You could have a student strong in STEM, but maybe they're not coherent. Maybe they don't volunteer. So universities want a diversity of intellectual communities, humanities, scholars, artists, economists, social scientists. Okay. They want depth and uniqueness and focus. A gap year hurts your application. When used strategically and explained well, a structured gap year can actually strengthen an application. But again, like everything we keep saying, intentionality, focus, it's part of a larger, consistent narrative. Early decision gives a massive advantage. Early decision accept rates are higher, but not magical. Applying ED to a school you're not a good fit for doesn't help, only if it's a good choice. Replacing myths with strategy obviously is the first step. A message for parents: pressure versus support. Students who feel intense academic pressure often make safe, uninspired choices. It's clear that although the student performs academically well, it's not their passion. I remember just a couple days ago uh, listening to the commencement speech at Harvard. This famous Chinese comedian was giving the address. And of course, he had some colorful language and it was comedic. But he said, "Hey, I don't want you to chase money. I want you to go get a solution for hunger. I want you to work on microplastics." So the idea is the best thing to do, and I realize there's pressure to be successful, help your child find their passion. The rest will take care of themselves. You still can make money with your passion. Comparison is the enemy of strategy. Okay. What worked for your neighbor's child, a sibling student, does not necessarily work for you. It has to be unique again and also passionate. They can tell if the student is applying for their parents because it looks good for their friend, because society values something. They can tell that instantly. Your passion is something that cannot be faked. So just own your passion. And if you really do, the language will flow in your essay and beyond. Long-term development beats short-term optics. Okay. A student who genuinely develops over 4 years makes a bigger impact than one who managed to appear good. Okay. So think long-term and you're going to be fine. Early planning is a gift, not a burden. We have students as early as grades 8 and 9 who are planning all of this. It doesn't mean that you're lost if you jump in sophomore, junior year, but it tends to get a little more difficult the later in the high school process you join. It's like anything in life. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Down here at the bottom, the most successful students we work with have one thing in common: parents who trusted the process and supported the journey. There's nothing more pleasing to my ears when the parent turns to the student and says, "What do you think? What do you want to do?" And that's a parent that's going to have a happier child and a child that makes a bigger difference. How Parinama partners with your family. Personalized roadmap. Every student and family we work with is unique. So we're going to help them build a prep, a voice, etc., that is unique to them. And that includes everything from the activities to the summers, test scores, scholarship, etc. Profile and spike development. We help students discover and build their spike, guiding them intentionally, distinctively, coherently over 2 to 4 years. The essay and application strategy, from identifying the right essay to polishing, and also, again, finding the right universities that's the right fit. Scholarship positioning. Scholarships is a topic unto itself. We help students research, align, and guide students towards scholarships whose criteria match their profile, identifying targets 1 to 2 years before applications, not 1 to 2 months. College list architecture. This is extremely important. We referenced this in another one of our three webinars that preceded this one. Basically, we have our target, breach, and safety universities. And so we help build out that list. Again, unique to each student. Long-term mentoring. We build with relationships with students over years. We get to know the student personally, not just academically. We get to know the family. Extremely important. Down here at the bottom, Parinama families start earlier, apply smarter, and achieve more outcomes than their counterparts who do not. Key takeaways. Admissions is a human process, and a narrative is a deciding factor. Authenticity. consistently outperforms manufactured impressiveness. Early planning is key, transforms a process from stressful to strategic. Parents, your mindset is variable in the outcome. In particular, support without pressure. It really will pay off. There is a strategy to all of this, and you don't have to figure it out alone. This is the beginning, not the end. Your child's story is being written, but there's many more chapters to come. You can book a free session with us, complimentary, down here at the bottom, the details, 30-minute one-on-one. We assess the child's profile, identify their spike, and map the path forward. And there's no obligation after that 30 minutes. Download the free planning guide. It's on the website. Stay connected with PCC, and you'll see all of our news and alerts. Okay, at this point, I welcome questions. Again, as a reminder for those that may have joined us, we covered the fourth part of a four-part series in webinars. And right now, the last 5 minutes, we're going to open it up to questions. If you have a question, please pop it into the chat on Zoom, and I'm happy to read it. So please take a moment while I take a sip of coffee and go ahead and type your question. And as you're thinking of your questions, if you think of questions after today, feel free to contact Parinama, and we will definitely get back to you. We'll give another minute to see if there's any questions. And if we wrap a minute or two early, I'm sure we all have things to do with a busy Saturday. Okay. If anybody needs anything else as we conclude, please contact Parinama. We have the website, of course, we have WhatsApp, etc., and we're more than happy to answer your questions. Other than that, I thank you for your participation, attending wherever you are, near or far, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care.